My wife spent money on repairs, but I found out that she spent it on her lover and manipulated me. I took my revenge. I was sitting on the couch, helping Lily with her tablet. She's still little, only 7, and even though she loves playing games, these constant updates and pop-ups always confuse her. It was a quiet Saturday afternoon. She was curled up next to me, her tiny legs tucked under her, completely focused on the screen. My wife was in the kitchen, probably on a call with her sister, like always. While I was trying to figure out why one of her apps wasn't working, a notification popped up. At first, I thought it was from one of her games, but then I saw my name. My chest tightened. I wasn't the kind of person who snooped, but the words caught my eye before I could even stop myself. It was a group chat, my wife, her sister, and their mother. My thumb hovered over the screen. Another message appeared, and my brain short-circuited. They were talking about me, laughing at me, saying how easy it was to manipulate me, how I just handed over money without asking questions, joking about how I was too trusting to ever notice, calling me a fool. Heat rushed up my neck. My pulse pounded in my ears. I kept scrolling. Their conversation stretched back for weeks, maybe months. They were openly mocking me, making fun of how I believed my wife loved me, how I never pushed back when she needed something, how I thought I was providing when, in reality, I was just being used. I felt sick. My stomach churned. My hands shook. My breath came in shallow bursts. A small hand nudged my arm. Dad. I nearly dropped the tablet. Lily was watching me, concern in her big, innocent eyes. What's wrong? She asked. I forced a smile, though my face felt frozen. Nothing, sweetheart. My voice sounded wrong, thick with something heavy and bitter. I turned off the tablet. Let's get you a snack. She nodded eagerly, already distracted. I stood up, my fists clenched at my sides. My wife was still in the kitchen, laughing at something on her phone, completely unaware. I had no idea what I was going to do next. But one thing was clear. I wasn't going to be their fool anymore. I couldn't sit still, my mind racing with the words I had just read. My wife, her sister, and their mother had been laughing at me behind my back, treating me like a fool, openly admitting to manipulating me for money. My hands were shaking as I pulled out my phone and opened my banking app, not even sure what I was looking for but knowing I had to check. The screen loaded, and my stomach dropped immediately. The numbers didn't make sense. There were massive withdrawals, way more than I had ever approved or expected. My pulse pounded as I scrolled through the transactions, each one making my chest tighter. Thousands of dollars had disappeared over time, siphoned out of my accounts under the label of home renovation expenses, except we hadn't renovated a single thing in years. I kept scrolling, each transaction hitting me like a gut punch, each withdrawal labeled with vague descriptions that suddenly made no sense. Contractor fees, material costs, miscellaneous upgrades, all leading to accounts I didn't recognize. I tapped on one of the transactions, my hands cold despite the anger burning through me, and the details made it clear. The money wasn't going to any business or renovation company. It was going into a personal account. I checked another withdrawal. Same thing. Another. The pattern was undeniable. Selena had been draining me for years, moving money around under false pretenses, and I had never even questioned it. The realization felt like a punch to the stomach, knocking the breath out of me, leaving me sitting there, frozen in place, gripping my phone so tightly my knuckles turned white. I swallowed hard, forcing myself to keep going, pulling up the savings account I had started when Lily was born, the one meant for her future, her education, her security. My throat tightened as the balance appeared on the screen. Barely anything left. All those years of careful planning, of setting money aside, of making sure my daughter would have everything she needed, gone. My jaw clenched so hard it hurt, my vision blurring for a second as I tried to process just how deep this betrayal ran. This wasn't just reckless spending. This wasn't just a wife dipping into shared money for personal luxuries. This was theft, deception, a carefully planned fraud that had gone on right under my nose for years. I forced myself to breathe, forced myself to keep my head clear, because I knew if I let the rage take over, I'd lose control. Instead, I opened my laptop, pulling up my bank statements, digging deeper, knowing I needed proof, knowing I needed to see every single transaction, every dollar that had been taken, knowing that once I had all the details in front of me, there would be no going back. I sat there, staring at my bank statements, my hands still shaking, my chest tight with a mixture of anger and disbelief. Every transaction I uncovered was another dagger to the gut, proof that the woman I had trusted, the woman I had built a life with, had been lying to me, robbing me blind, treating me like nothing more than a paycheck she could manipulate at will. I knew I couldn't just confront her without a plan. She was too good at twisting things, too good at playing the innocent, and if I went in blind, she'd find a way to turn everything against me. I needed proof, undeniable proof, and I needed to be smart about how I got it. Without wasting another second, I grabbed my phone and called Lucas, my closest friend and a damn good lawyer. He picked up almost immediately, his voice casual at first, but the second he heard the tension in mine, he got serious. I didn't sugarcoat anything. I told him everything, what I had found in the group chat, the missing money, the fake transactions, the years of lies I had unknowingly funded. I expected shock, maybe even disbelief, but instead, there was only a brief pause before he exhaled sharply and said exactly what I needed to hear. Don't do anything stupid. Just gather evidence. You need to have everything airtight before you make a move. He was right. If I confronted her now, she'd deny everything, maybe even accuse me of being paranoid. Worse, if she realized I was onto her, she could start covering her tracks, moving money to places I couldn't trace, making it even harder to prove what she'd done. No, I needed to be careful. I needed to document every single thing. I thanked Lucas and hung up, my mind already racing with what I had to do next. That night, after Selena went to bed, I got to work. I ordered a set of small, discreet security cameras and installed them in the office, the living room, and near the front door, places where she handled bills, made phone calls, and, most importantly, used her laptop. If she was still moving money, I needed to catch her in the act. I went through her messages again, taking screenshots of every conversation that mentioned me, my money, or their little manipulation game. I backed up my bank statements, printed everything out, and started piecing together a timeline of when the transfers had started, how much she had taken, and where it had gone. Over the next few days, I watched, waited, and collected every bit of evidence I could. I saw her on the phone with Amanda, laughing about another home expense she was about to charge to my account. I watched her sit at the kitchen table, moving money between accounts while casually sipping coffee, completely unaware that I was documenting everything. Every transaction, every message, every lie. I recorded it all. And the more I gathered, the clearer it became. This wasn't a mistake. This wasn't something I could forgive. She had been planning this for a long time, and I wasn't going to let her get away with it. I had spent days quietly gathering evidence, documenting every stolen dollar, every lie, every manipulative conversation that proved Selena had been draining me financially for years. But just when I thought I had uncovered the worst of her betrayal, something happened that made my stomach drop all over again. It was a normal evening, just me and Lily in the living room while Selena was out, supposedly running errands, and I wasn't even thinking about the investigation anymore when Lily, curled up on the couch with a book, absent-mindedly flipping the pages, said something so casually that it took me a second to even register the words. She told me that Mommy's friend from work had come over again today, and for a moment, I didn't think much of it until I realized she wasn't talking about a female coworker or someone I knew. Trying to keep my voice steady, I asked her what friend she meant, and without even looking up, she said it was the tall one, the man with the ring like mine. A strange numbness spread through me as I processed what she had just said, and with every passing second, my pulse pounded harder in my ears, my hands gripping the couch as I tried to sound normal, as if this was just another conversation. Forcing a casual tone, I asked if she knew his name, but she only shrugged and said she didn't know because Mommy just called him babe sometimes, and in that instant, it felt like my entire world had shifted, as if the betrayal I had been uncovering wasn't just about money anymore, but something much worse, something even more personal, something that made my stomach churn with a rage so deep I could barely think. I had spent weeks believing that the worst thing she had done was steal from me, treating me like a fool, using me as a bank, but now I knew that while she was emptying our accounts, she was also opening our home to another man, letting someone else walk through my front door, calling him the same name she had once called me, making a mockery of everything I had believed in. I knew I needed proof, just like with the money, because if I confronted her now, she would lie, twist things, make me look crazy, and I refused to give her the chance to manipulate me again. So that night, after putting Lily to bed, I set up another hidden camera, this time in the hallway near the front door, making sure it was positioned perfectly to capture everything. I didn't say a word to Selena, I didn't ask her anything, I just waited, barely able to focus on anything else, every hour that passed stretching endlessly, my mind running through every possibility, every excuse she might try to use, every way she could try to gaslight me if I didn't have undeniable evidence. 2 days later, while I was at work, I got the notification I had been dreading but expecting, a motion alert from the hallway camera, and when I opened the live feed, There he was, a tall man, dark hair, well-dressed in a suit, moving with the kind of ease that told me this wasn't his first time stepping into my house. My eyes locked onto his left hand, and there it was, clear as day, a wedding ring, the final confirmation that this wasn't just some friend or colleague, but someone just as married as I was, someone betraying his own family just as Selena had been betraying me. I watched in sickening silence as he stepped inside like he belonged there, and then Selena appeared in the frame, her face lighting up with a smile I hadn't seen in years, the kind of warmth and excitement she hadn't shown me in longer than I could even remember, and before I could even process the full weight of it, she leaned up and kissed him. My entire body went cold, my fingers tightening around my phone, my jaw clenching so hard it ached, but I didn't look away. I forced myself to watch as she took his hand and led him deeper into the house. My house, the place I had built for my family, the place where my daughter was sleeping upstairs, completely unaware that her mother was bringing another man into our home. I sat there in my office, my heart hammering in my chest, my breathing slow and controlled, my mind completely blank except for one singular thought. I had everything I needed now. There were no more doubts, no more excuses, no more waiting, no more hoping that maybe I had misunderstood something, because this was as clear as it could get, and I knew with absolute certainty that I was done playing the fool, done letting her take advantage of me, done pretending that this wasn't happening, and whatever came next, whatever I decided to do, it was going to be on my terms, and this time, she wouldn't see it coming. I didn't sleep that night. I sat in my office, staring at my laptop screen, replaying the footage over and over, each time feeling my stomach twist into tighter knots. The proof was undeniable. Selena wasn't just stealing from me, she was sleeping with another man in my own home, laughing at me behind my back, draining my accounts while she played the role of a devoted wife. I wanted to march into the bedroom, wake her up, throw every piece of evidence in her face, and demand answers, but I forced myself to stay in control. I had spent too long being blind, too long trusting, too long letting her manipulate me. If I was going to take her down, I had to do it right. The next morning, I made 2 phone calls. The first was to a financial auditor, someone Lucas had recommended, a guy who specialized in uncovering fraud, especially in cases like mine, where money had been siphoned off over time. The second was to a private investigator. I already had enough evidence of her affair from the footage, but I needed more. I needed airtight proof, undeniable documentation that I could use when the time came to destroy her legally. The financial audit started immediately, and within days, the scale of what Selena had done began to unfold in ways I hadn't even imagined. She hadn't just been stealing from me. She had been laundering the money, moving it through fake accounts, setting up bogus transactions, and making it look like legitimate expenses. What made it even worse was that this wasn't the first time she had done it. The auditor dug deeper and found traces of similar activities tied to her past, bank records that connected her to at least 2 other men before me, men she had financially bled dry before moving on to her next target. She had a pattern, a method, a system. She wasn't just a lying wife. She was a con artist. I could barely breathe when I saw the full report. The fake renovations, the money being funneled into hidden accounts, the sudden drops in balances that I had always brushed off as normal household expenses. It had all been part of a carefully planned scam. She had likely married me with this intention from the start, and she had nearly gotten away with it. While the financial auditor was untangling the money trail, the private investigator was tracking her movements, gathering more evidence of her affair. The more I uncovered, the sicker I felt. She wasn't just meeting her lover at hotels. She was using my money to pay for their getaways, their dinners, their gifts. He was married too, and his wife had no idea what was happening. They had been sneaking around for over a year, meeting up while I was at work, planning weekend trips when I thought she was visiting her mother. Every receipt, every email, every hidden transaction, every deleted message, the investigator collected it all. When he handed me the final report, I didn't even need to open it. I already knew exactly what it would say. Selena had spent years lying to me, stealing from me, humiliating me, and treating me like an idiot. But now I had everything I needed, and it was my turn to make her pay. I waited for the perfect moment. I had spent weeks gathering evidence, uncovering every lie, every stolen dollar, every betrayal. I had the bank statements, the hidden transactions, the messages where they laughed about how easy it was to manipulate me, the photos of Selena with her so-called friend from work, and the investigator's full report that detailed everything in cold, undeniable facts. Now, it was time to set the trap. Selena's family loved their traditions, and Sunday dinner at Victoria's house was sacred. Every week, they gathered around the big dining table, pretending to be a picture-perfect family, and every week, I sat there, playing along, oblivious to the fact that they had been using me, stealing from me, laughing behind my back. Not this time. I walked in, calm, collected, carrying an envelope under my arm. Selena greeted me with a kiss on the cheek as if nothing was wrong, as if she wasn't cheating on me, as if she hadn't drained our accounts. Amanda smirked like always, probably assuming I was the same fool I had always been. Victoria poured wine, already launching into one of her usual conversations about smart financial planning, as if she wasn't the mastermind behind all of it. Dinner was served, and just as I expected, Victoria brought up Selena's new business venture. I nearly laughed. I had read the messages where they planned this, the next phase of their scam, their way of explaining the extra money they had been moving around, just in case I ever asked. Selena smiled sweetly, pretending to be a hard-working entrepreneur, but before she could continue the lie, my phone buzzed in my pocket. Right on time. I pulled it out and answered, speaking just loud enough for the whole table to hear. Yeah, come to the door. I'll get it now. Selena and the others barely noticed, too wrapped up in their conversation. But when I came back with the thick envelope in my hands, they finally looked up. I didn't sit down. I didn't need to. Instead, I tossed the envelope onto the middle of the table. Since we're talking about finances, I figured now's a good time to go over some of the numbers. Selena's smile faltered. Amanda's eyes narrowed. Victoria pursed her lips, already sensing something was off. Go ahead, I said, leaning back against my chair. Open it. For a moment, no one moved. Then Selena hesitantly reached for the envelope, pulling out the first few pages. As soon as she saw the words, the color drained from her face. Bank statements. Transactions. Large sums of money disappearing into hidden accounts. Amanda grabbed a page from her hands, her eyes scanning the numbers before flicking up to me in panic. What the hell is this? You tell me, I said, my voice perfectly steady. That's money that was taken from my accounts. Fake expenses. Transfers to accounts in Selena's name. And here's the fun part. Turn the page. Selena's hands were shaking as she flipped to the next set of documents. Screenshots of the group chat where she, Amanda, and Victoria mocked me, openly discussing how easy it was to steal from me, how they had done it before to other men, how they were planning to do it again. Victoria snatched the papers from her daughters, skimming them with wide eyes. But before she could say anything, Amanda's husband, who had been silent up until now, reached forward and pulled out another set of documents. His face darkened as he scanned them. This isn't just Selena, he muttered under his breath, flipping through pages before shoving them toward Amanda. You're in on this too. Amanda's head snapped toward me, rage flashing in her eyes. You went through my stuff? I shrugged. You made it easy. Maybe next time don't discuss fraud in a family group chat. Chaos erupted in an instant. Victoria slammed her hands on the table, shouting at me, demanding to know how dare I spy on them, as if I was the one who had betrayed someone. Amanda turned on her husband, insisting it wasn't what it looked like, but he wasn't buying it. Meanwhile, Selena sat frozen, gripping the papers, her mouth opening and closing, but no words coming out. She hadn't even seen the worst of it yet. I leaned forward and tapped the last folder. You might want to check that one too. With trembling hands, Selena reached for it and pulled out the final set of photos. Her secret lover, walking into our house, taking off his wedding ring, her meeting him in hotel rooms. She didn't even try to deny it. The room exploded into full-blown chaos. Amanda was screaming at her husband, who had stormed out, slamming the door behind him. Victoria was yelling at me, at Selena, at Amanda, but her words didn't even register. Selena, who had spent years playing me like a fool, just sat there, pale and shaking, unable to speak. I stood up, adjusting my jacket, taking my time as I looked at each of them. I'll be filing for divorce first thing in the morning. All the evidence has already been sent to my lawyer, and since fraud is a felony, I wouldn't be surprised if some of you end up in court, maybe even in jail. And as for you, I turned to Victoria, who was still fuming. I'd rethink giving financial advice, considering where you're headed. With that, I walked to the door. I didn't need to hear anything else. They had spent years plotting behind my back, thinking they were untouchable, thinking I was too blind to ever figure it out. They weren't laughing anymore. The moment I walked out of that house, I knew there was no turning back. The chaos behind me, the shouting, the desperation, the crumbling of their perfect little scam. It was all just the beginning. I had spent too long being played, too long being lied to, too long being used, and now I was the one in control. The next morning, I met with Lucas, handing over every piece of evidence I had collected. The financial fraud, the embezzlement, the hidden accounts, the stolen money, the tax evasion. It was all there, neatly packaged, undeniable, and ready to be put to use. I didn't just want a divorce. I wanted everything. I wanted full custody of Lily. I wanted every stolen cent accounted for. I wanted them to face the consequences of everything they had done. Selena tried to call me, text me, even showed up at the house once, but I didn't give her a second of my time. The only thing I sent her was the notice from my lawyer. I was filing for divorce, and I was taking Lily with me. She fought at first, of course. She cried, begged, swore she would change. But the moment she realized I had the upper hand, that there was no escaping what she had done, her real self came out. She tried to fight for custody, claiming I was being unreasonable, but the court didn't take long to make a decision once they saw the evidence. The fraud alone was bad enough, but when they saw that she had been stealing from Lily's future, that she had been using our daughter's college fund to finance her affair, it was over. The judge granted me full custody. She had visitation rights, but supervised only. She had lost everything. Her marriage, her reputation, her access to the money she had spent years draining. But that was only the beginning. Victoria and Amanda weren't any better off. The lawsuits started piling up. Between the fraud, the tax evasion, and the money laundering, there were serious charges against all of them. The IRS got involved once the financial audit revealed just how much they had hidden over the years. They had been playing these scams for too long, jumping from one man to another, thinking they were untouchable. But now, they were exposed. Amanda's husband, after reading every disgusting detail of her involvement, wasted no time filing for divorce. He took their kids, their house, and left her with nothing but her growing legal bills. She tried to claim she was a victim, that she had just gone along with her sister's plan, but it didn't matter. The court saw her as an accomplice, and when the charges became official, her life fell apart. Victoria, the mastermind, the woman who had raised her daughters to be just like her, was finally facing the consequences of the empire of lies she had built. Her bank accounts were frozen, her assets seized, her reputation destroyed. The woman who had once bragged about how easily she could control men now sat in court, facing the reality of prison time. Selena, Amanda, and Victoria had spent years taking advantage of people, treating men like disposable sources of income, laughing behind their backs while stealing from them. But in the end, their greed, their arrogance, and their belief that they would never be caught had led them exactly where they belonged. I walked away with my daughter, my freedom, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had finally been served. They had spent years thinking they were untouchable. They were wrong. The downfall of Selena and her family wasn't just legal. It was social, financial, and absolute. Everything they had built, everything they had schemed for, every lie they had told, collapsed around them like a house of cards, and there was nothing they could do to stop it. The first to feel the consequences was Selena's lover, the man who had walked into my house, kissed my wife, and thought he could keep living his double life without consequences. I hadn't needed to do anything to him. His own wife took care of that. Once she received the private investigator's full report, she didn't just file for divorce. She went straight for his business. Turns out, she wasn't just his wife. She was his business partner and co-owner. And the moment she found out about the affair, she dismantled everything. She took full control of their company, cut him out of every deal, and made sure every client, every investor, and every business partner knew exactly what kind of man he was. His reputation in the industry was shattered overnight. Contracts were pulled, partnerships ended, and within months, he was drowning in debt, scrambling to recover what little he had left. But no one wanted to work with a fraud, and certainly not with a man whose own wife had exposed him as a cheater and a liar. Victoria, the mastermind behind it all, didn't fare much better. She had always loved to flaunt her status, sitting at the top of her social circle, acting like she was better than everyone else. But the moment the fraud was exposed, she became a pariah. The elite club she had been part of for years, the one where she rubbed shoulders with politicians and wealthy investors, kicked her out without hesitation. No one wanted to be associated with a woman under investigation for financial crimes, especially one who had stolen from her own son-in-law. Her money, the foundation of her lifestyle, was suddenly under scrutiny. The IRS froze her accounts, forcing her to pay back every cent she had illegally funneled through her scams. The high-end lifestyle, the fancy vacations, the designer clothes, the social prestige, it all vanished. Without money or status to protect her, she was left with nothing but her shame. And then there was Selena, the woman who had played the role of the loving wife while draining me dry, who had mocked me behind my back, who had thought she was untouchable, fell the hardest. The divorce destroyed her financially. Without access to my money, she was suddenly forced to face the reality of her own financial ruin. The stolen money was gone, the hidden accounts emptied, and the court wasn't sympathetic. She was buried in debt, forced to pay back the fraud, the legal fees, and her mounting expenses with no income to rely on. Her so-called friends disappeared overnight. The women who had once laughed with her about how easy it was to manipulate men suddenly wanted nothing to do with her. No one wanted to be associated with a woman who had been exposed as a cheater, a fraud, and a scam artist. With her reputation in shambles, no job prospects, no money, and no support, she had no choice but to live off government assistance, a reality that must have been unbearable for someone who had once prided herself on her expensive taste. For years, Selena, Amanda, and Victoria had lived off the backs of others, treating men like disposable sources of income, manipulating, stealing, and laughing behind their victims' backs. But in the end, they lost everything. And I walked away with my daughter, my freedom, and the satisfaction of knowing that justice had finally caught up with them. A few months later, life looked completely different. The house I had once shared with Selena was sold, every trace of that life wiped away, and I had moved into a new home with Lily, a place that was truly ours, filled with nothing but peace, laughter, and the fresh start we both deserved. For the first time in years, I felt free. No more deception, no more manipulation, no more waking up every day wondering what new lie I was unknowingly living. Lily was thriving. She had transferred to a better school, one with smaller classes, better teachers, and a supportive environment where she could truly flourish. She made new friends quickly, and I could see the happiness in her eyes every day when she told me about her lessons, her classmates, and all the new things she was learning. The weight of the toxic household she had unknowingly grown up in was gone, and in its place was a world where she could just be a happy, carefree little girl. We traveled, something I had always wanted to do but never could, since my money had been constantly funneled into Selena's bottomless pit of lies. We went to the beach, where Lily ran through the waves, laughing as if the past had never existed. We went to the mountains, where we hiked trails together, watching the sunset from a peak neither of us ever thought we'd see. Every trip, every experience, was a reminder that life had finally become ours again. Then one day, while running errands, we walked into a grocery store, just like any other normal afternoon. I was pushing the cart, half listening to Lily talk about her day at school, when I turned the corner into one of the aisles and stopped short. Selena was standing there. She was hunched over, scanning the price tags on the bottom shelf, clutching a basket filled with the cheapest store-brand products. Her hair was dull, her clothes were plain, her nails, once always perfectly manicured with my money, were chipped and bare. She looked up at me, her face paling instantly, her eyes flicking between me and Lily, who was completely unbothered, as if she were just looking at another stranger in the store. There was no anger in her eyes, no defiance, no smugness like before. Just defeat. I didn't say anything. I didn't need to. The past had already settled itself. I had won. Before the silence could stretch any longer, Lily tugged at my sleeve, looking up at me with that bright, carefree smile. "Daddy, can we get ice cream?" I glanced back at Selena just in time to see the way her shoulders tensed, the way her jaw clenched, the way she forced herself to look away, pretending to focus on the items in her basket, knowing she couldn't afford anything extra anymore. I smiled at my daughter, nodding. "Of course, sweetheart. Get whatever you want," she cheered, skipping ahead toward the freezer section, leaving me standing there for just a second longer. I took one last look at the broken woman in front of me, the woman who had once thought she could steal everything from me and walk away untouched. Then I turned my back on her, for good, and walked toward my daughter, toward our future, toward a life that was finally ours and ours alone. I never sought revenge. I never needed to. The moment I discovered the truth, about the money, the betrayal, the years of deception, I could have exploded, confronted Selena, screamed, fought, tried to tear her world apart in the same way she had done to mine. But I didn't. Not because I was weak, not because I was afraid, but because true strength isn't in anger, it's in patience. People told me I should have lashed out, should have exposed her immediately, should have taken revenge in a way that made her suffer right then and there. But I knew better. I knew that if I wanted to truly free myself, I had to play the long game. While she laughed behind my back, thinking she was getting away with everything, I was quietly collecting proof. While she was living in luxury off my money, believing I would never question a thing, I was building a case that would destroy her completely. When the moment came, I didn't have to raise my voice. I didn't have to throw accusations wildly, hoping one would stick. I just handed over the truth, and I let everything collapse around her. Selena, Amanda, and Victoria spent their lives thinking they were untouchable, believing they were always one step ahead, that they could manipulate and steal without consequences. But truth has a way of catching up with people, and when it finally did, there was nothing left for them to hide behind. I never sought revenge. I just let the truth do the work for me. And in the end, it was far more satisfying than anger ever could have been.